much time. All right, Mike J. So Odom and obviously Rule. Let's start with Rule, the Carolina area. A little bit of a bigger back, versatile, one back offense. Looks fairly explosive. Not elite level speed. What do we like about Rule and kind of where he is?
What I like about him is that it's a little bit different than the previous running backs you brought in, specifically in terms of Mekhi Nelson and Jamarian Parker. But I think he's different than Connor Booth too. I mean, I think that people want to probably lump those two together, but I think there's some difference there too. He has some thump in his game, which I think is important. I also think this is a guy who's right around 6 foot right now, right around 200 pounds. By the time he actually carries a ball for Nebraska, whenever that happens, I think he's going to be like a pretty well built 215, 220. You're going to get some weight on him. And I think he's a workhorse. I like his mentality. This was a guy that initially, when I was going through Nebraska's running back rankings or their running back board, which was pretty much always Brian Bonner, Jamal Rule, Josephin Walker in some sort of order. I was big on Brian Bonner. I still think Brian Bonner has a lot of explosiveness and big play upside. But I started talking myself into Jamal Rule sometime around May when I was going through it over Walker a little bit because I think the other thing that Rule does that maybe gets lost in this is he catches the ball out of the backfield pretty well already. And if we've learned anything from Dana Holgerson's 4 games and Matt Rule this spring, they want running backs who can do a little bit of everything. I also like that because he provides some thump, it makes me think that he's going to be a guy who can pick up pass protection pretty easily too. Like I think they ended up with a sort of versatile all-around running back that you wouldn't have necessarily thought if you just looked at, the baseline. This is what his height, weight is. You're just thinking, oh, he's probably not going to be that fast. Well, his 400 time is really, really good. I mean, I think he has more bursts than it is straight fast. But this is someone that I actually like this running back edition quite a bit. I think Parker might be a little higher for me when I weigh the 4 guys Nebraska's brought in, under EJ Barthel. But I ended up kind of talking myself into Jamal Rule quite a bit. And I think some of it is I really like what I think his body size is going to be by the time he actually is going to be involved in Nebraska's offense. Plus, he's just a personality. When I talked with him, he seems like someone that's ready to go to work. Like if he could skip his senior year and just be at Nebraska and go to work right away, I think we would want to do that too. So there's some intangibles in there that I liked about my conversations with Jamal Rule as well.
I like how he runs behind his pads, right? He doesn't play small.
Runs heavy.
Yeah, he's a heavy runner, and he falls forward.
He's got a good center of gravity too. Like you're not getting like a lot of clean shots on him. Yeah. He moves off of contact. I've had this conversation with different college coaches because for me, and I am not an evaluator, I don't want to be considered an evaluator. I just have thoughts and opinions and I can't stop talking. So, don't misconstrue those things. I have a tougher time with running backs and evaluation than I do almost any other position because so much of the highlights that you see is a guy just running through one arm tackle and being faster than everyone else on the field. That doesn't tell you how they're going to play against likewise talent. Watching someone who always bounces everything to the outside and scores 70-yard touchdowns doesn't tell you how he's going to play in the Big Ten when he's got to go through traffic. When you put on Jamal Rule's film, you see someone that can move off of contact. You see someone that moves between his tackles and runs through the middle, provides punishment. I don't think it makes him a 4-star or a 5-star or anything like that, but I can more visually see how he can help an offense than I can that home run hitters whose film is just him running past everyone.
Yeah, I remember really struggling. I'll give you 2 that'll be right in your wheelhouse, Schaefer. Evaluating Leon Jackson and Terrell Newby. It's like every time you watch Leon Jackson, it's like, oh my God, Pasco. This guy is, what kind of football are they playing up there in Washington, right? This dude was just a long strider, and he was really hard to grade. And then Newby, a lot of home runs.
And Chaminade. He would bounce one cut off the tackle and then just be gone. And I remember being really excited about him. And it's not like his career at Nebraska wasn't solid, but it just wasn't the running back that I thought he was going to be.
But you know what though, Shape? He turned out to be a little bit different.
That's not really who he ended up being at Nebraska.
Like that Minnesota game where he was tough and those downhill slashing runs. I was like, he grew into being a more complete back. Like I think it was a process for him to learn to run in traffic and, change his low center of gravity versus in high school. And he was kind of just getting the baton. Those were two guys I think highly, highly rated that were really hard to eval because of what you just were describing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And one of the things about Newbie is I think he had to make himself get tough. He didn't have to be tough in high school. And early in his freshman year, I think that was like a big thing for him is he had to prove that he could be tough for Ron Brown in 2013.
Just thinking out loud here. What's the next position you have the most trouble with when you're watching high school? Because like I tend to have that issue with wide receiver sometimes. I even have it from college to the NFL sometimes with wide receivers.
So does the NFL.
Well, fair. Because a lot of times
it
is just so physically, like if you have a guy in high school running a 4.4, he can just run by everybody. And kind of like we were talking with running backs where it's like, well, I don't know if he can run a route. I don't know how good his hands are. I don't know.
You can't really see concepts when you watch tape. And a lot of NFL is concepts and being on the same page as your QB.
Like, is there another position? Running backs, I'm right there with you. There's been a ton of guys where I'm like, oh, that's a big home run hitter or whatever. But then you go, okay, he's breaking tackles, but why isn't he running away from guys? Like, it's a really challenging one. Is there another one that just pops over your head and you're like, I don't know if this guy's any good or not? I can't tell.
This feels a little unfair because I think it's hard to find high school guys who are going to translate to being college safeties. But I think safety can be difficult at the high school level because what they're being asked to do or how they're being asked to play doesn't always fit with what they might be as a college defender. And sometimes you see guys that are corners in high school get moved to safeties because of hips and needing to turn and all of that. Safety is just one of those tough ones. I mean, sometimes I think some of your better safeties end up being offensive high school recruits that get flipped over to the position. There's some examples of that too. So I don't know. That's a tough position. I mean, they're all hard. If it was easy, then, football wouldn't be as ridiculously difficult as it is. But safety immediately came to mind. I'm trying to think if there's another one. Wide receiver, some of the difficulty with wide receiver is that you can have a guy who has all the physical traits, but if he has a high school quarterback who can't get him the ball, like the film becomes somewhat difficult. And I think there's a fair amount of examples of guys who show up at places either as walk-ons or, lower level wide receivers that it's like, oh, wow, this guy has physical gifts. I wonder his quarterback had the arm strength of getting it 25 yards down the field and he had to float it to get it there. Like that can make it a little bit difficult too. I mean, so much of high school film is having to determine what else is around a situation.
Yeah.
And then deciding, are they benefiting because they're just that much better? Is he being hindered because he doesn't have any actual help? That kind of thing.
Let me ask you something, Schaefer, about this whole style and substance thing. And this is on the heels of, taking pictures and being visible and which should you be working and we need more recruits and whatever people say about Nebraska branding versus the productivity. When you look at a guy like Odem and saw how early Nebraska was in and then the whirlwind of the next 12 months and him coming back to, hey, who was riding with me all along from a relationship standpoint, is it easy or difficult for you to parse through the images and the social media presence that you see from Nebraska versus what you really think they're about on the recruiting trail? Or do they overlap that has allowed them to be somewhat successful with getting these guys on campus?
I think it's all different things that all come together to create one big picture. It's hard for me to pretend to care really positively or negatively that they brought what I believe is a bull into the weight room and took they're just doing a thing. Like, it's not that different than Texas driving 6 Maseratis into their stadium and having recruits take pictures with them. Like, this is what happens on official visits. I'm not going to punish Nebraska for it. And I also find the dumbest comments on the internet to be, why don't you do that stuff when you win games?
Yeah.
It's
don't get me started. I had a meltdown.
It's sort of, I just want to say this to the internet commenting community. The football season isn't played in June. You can't win a football game in June. So maybe just like shut up and not pay attention to it if you can't handle the fact that someone's doing something in a month that isn't August, September, October, November, where the football games are being played. So I, like there's that aspect of it too. But I think the thing that you said that stands out the most to me, and I wonder if it's a John Butler, I wonder if it's someone else in the recruiting department. They've had a really good cycle in particular, even though they only have one commitment, they had another one and he went to Florida. They have identified defensive backs that the evaluation community in the recruiting world has been like, oh, yeah, we missed that one pretty bad, didn't we? Like CJ Brano went from someone who no one was talking about. When I called Andrew Ivins, who I think the world of, is very good at what he does, I was like, what do you know about this kid? And he's like, well, he's in a professional golf community. Like, they don't produce football players. He's big and he's long and he runs fast, but I don't know that much about him. Like a month later, CJ Brano is the best player at a camp in Orlando, featuring a ton of 5-star, 4-star talent. Like, he immediately it's visible what it is about him that stands out. Danny Odem, Nebraska was all about Danny Odem before really anyone knew who Danny Odem was. I mean, he had some other offers, but they got in very quickly. One of the reasons why they were able to survive this onslaught of Clemson and Auburn and Ohio State and Penn State and Oklahoma is because they built that relationship early on. And it was, hey, we believe in your talent. Other people might come in when you get to a certain level. We're here now. We think that you're this good now. There's other defensive backs like that too, some of which they were never able to get on campus but I just think, like, and again, I don't know if it's a John Butler thing, but that's sort of where I want to give some of the early credit. And then Addison Williams has done a really nice job sort of providing the personable aspect to the recruitment with it. Not that Butler can't, but position coach is a big deal in that whole thing. The evaluation of defensive backs has been really good in this coaching change. So it was important to me that they were able to close one of these guys out so that the proof is there for people. Like, Danny Odem wasn't a slam dunk. Everybody thought this guy was a 4-star right away. Danny Odem was Nebraska, Purdue, Louisville, Pitt, I think, in early January. And then I just ripped off all the official visits he took. It started with Clemson. Then he went to Auburn. Then he was at Oklahoma. And then he was at Ohio State. And then he was at Penn State. And he finished at Nebraska. That's a pretty impressive group. And all of those teams would have taken that commitment. Ohio State definitely wanted him. Like, anyone who tells you otherwise is just straight lying to your face.
Schaefer, let me ask you about when the cycle is going to be what it is for high school. And I think you've mapped it out pretty clear about what you think Nebraska's trying to do, right? We know the youth on the roster. If they win this year, listen, we're young. We've got good bodies. We're going to continue to develop on the way. If somehow the season doesn't go the way they want it to, you may have to hit the portal a little harder with kind of immediate help, depending on what year 4 looks like. But you still have the young guys in the fray. Are you comfortable with how selective isn't the word, but like Nebraska's philosophy in terms of how they're attacking high school recruiting, given the current roster configuration?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors to it. One of the things I maybe undervalued is it's going to be more difficult in the way that high school football recruiting is operating to bring in almost a whole new defensive staff the way that they did and then pick up recruiting like nothing happened. I mean, I think that is part of why things seem as slow as they have in 2026. I mean, Danny Odem's just their second commitment on the defensive side of the ball right now, joining Jace Reynolds. Yep. They may not get a defensive lineman in this class. It just might not work out in that way. So I don't know if comfortable is the right word, but I think they pivoted in such a way where I understand what they're doing. They weren't ever going to take a big class. They were highly focused on certain players. I think they were put in a tough situation with the lack of clarity with NIL and the House settlement. And so instead of being in a spot where they were going to have to walk some things back, Matt Rhule said very early on in the spring, hey, we are not going to overpromise and underdeliver. And that puts them in a situation where maybe they get the spatula out and they're flipping some people late in the cycle because they win some football games, or they have clarity as to how they can operate their NIL.
Yeah, I could see him having to circle back.
So I think they have done a pretty good job reacting, responding, and not panicking. And I think that's the critical thing. They didn't just bring in a bunch of dudes for visits and take commitments to take commitments. Every one of the guys that they have at this point in time are people that they've wanted, with maybe one exception in terms of we'll see what happens with Bonwell Witt. I think that's sort of the one spot in this class where, we'll see what happens there. But I look at a guy like Luke Sorensen. That is a really big commitment for what Nebraska wanted. They identified 4 tight ends, and they weren't able to get Camden Jensen, who I think was their number 1 of that 4. But they were able to get a guy in Luke Sorensen, who I would maybe argue is their best commitment out of their 8 that they have right now.
He's got good tape, man. He's got really good tape.
I mean, if you like watching someone just be nasty as a tight end, I mean, that's what this guy is. He's a great blocking tight end, and he can catch the ball a little bit too.
His temperament's going to fit Satterfield and Mosey too.
Yep. He's a good personality fit. The family's a good fit. I mean, it's just it's a situation where it all lined up and made sense. And so when you can fire your shots correctly and you get guys like that, you get, those 2 offensive linemen. They're guys that they wanted, Rex Waterman and Hayden Ainsworth. They don't care that the ratings maybe don't line up. Here's something else that I haven't written about that I shouldn't probably just be saying on your show. I should have written about it first, but here we go. 3 of their last few commitments in Odem, Sorensen, and Ainsworth are all really young. They're going to be 17, 18 years old when they get to campus. They're going to have an opportunity to go through a redshirt season in which they're going to get taught the correct way to lift and to add weight to their body and to do the nutrition. And so you're kind of banking on a development system where it's like, if we can get some of these guys in young before they start to really age into what their body is, we can train this thing in the exact way that we want. I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think that's just oh, wow, there just happens to be a few younger, like that is something that they're looking for. That's part of the data set. And they're just, again, it's not going to be a class where you're excited about what the recruiting ranking necessarily looks like. But I do think they're going to have a high percentage of contributors because they're being very smart about who they're taking and what they want in this class. And they know that they don't have to just take people to take them. I think that's such an important part of this.
Yeah. Do you, Schaefer, I know we're keeping you along here a little bit, but I remember when Evan Cooper and that whole thing happened where he was no longer with the coaching staff, that a lot of people talked about, especially in the defensive back room, and we brought up Odem and Brana as really, really good evaluation wins, even if only one of them ends up on campus here. But are you kind of impressed that the evaluation Denver took a hit when it was sort of seen like Cooper was that ace in the hole in the evaluation part of the equation for Nebraska?
Yeah, I don't know who gets the credit for it, because I think there's a handful of people that Matt Rhule is now turning to, because Evan Cooper was his guy. Like,
so that narrative was accurate, right? Like that's what was
100%.
I mean, that was it. And it wasn't just defensive backs. Like Evan Cooper was watching the offensive linemen and giving his feedback, and Matt Rhule would take that. And so now you've got sort of this, you have 3 defensive coordinators on staff, and Addison Williams and John Butler and Phil Snow. Phil Snow is watching film and giving his feedback on defensive backs. You don't like that clearly matters to Matt Rhule. So I think that they have, I think they've done a nice job of replacing what it was that I think Evan Cooper really brought to the table. But I think it's more of a committee approach perhaps than what it was before, where Cooper was really involved. Like there was, Bryce Turner was him. Carlin Jones, who didn't end up at Nebraska, was because of Bryce Turner and Evan Cooper, and Evan putting on the film and being like, oh yeah, we want this guy. And now he's going to be a pretty good college defensive lineman elsewhere in the country. So to replace that, I think wasn't going to be easy, but I do think he's leaning on some veteran coaches and just their thought process. And then Matt Rhule has his own eye for talent. Like we kind of undervalue him in terms of being a football coach sometimes. And the guy has been around the game forever. And he has seen so many people. And I think, we want to provide all of this credit or give him credit for how he builds up these other coaches. but we don't always give him credit for sort of being this source of knowledge and evaluation and talent and all of that too.
Yeah, Shape, that is so true. Like sometimes he'll give me a hard time. We'll go back and forth on a player or something, and he's like, "Oh, I know how you hate the measurables, and I need this and I need to see that." And sometimes I just look at him and I laugh. And he goes, "But let's understand. I know what I'm looking for. Clearly, it's just like."
I think he feels that way. Like legitimately,
he
doesn't feel like he
They're
gets credit.
Like, hearing you say that out loud is so true. Like, I think if he could not care about how it would be received, he would say, "You know what? I know a good player when I see one. Are we cool?" Well, I just think he would say something like that.
It was a different context, but he said it out loud. He goes, "Hey, I was a pretty good football coach before I became a head coach." Like, that's a thing he said in a press conference.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a stigma attached to some head coaches in college football where it's like they just kind of operate up here and everything else happens below, and then their job is on Saturdays. Matt Rhule's job is literally every minute of every day, and that's how he wants it. That's who he is.
Pretty much.
And the thing is, if you aren't operating in that same plane, probably not going to spend a lot of time with him.
Oh, that 2 minutes is priceless.
Oh man, I don't know if we can top that.
Pretty good, Mike J. Pretty good.
We may have to call it a day with you, Schaefer. I do want to get to that next week. I'm going to hold on to the article that you sent us.
I know,
because I do want to get to that.
Studied.
I know, but we will get to that next week because it's summer. We got some time. But I do.
We got time.
That was a fantastic idea too, because I skimmed through that originally.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. That's a tease for next week.
All right, we'll save it for next week. Thanks, guys.
Dave, appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you next week.